A girl reveals her father cries in his sleep. Stallone asks one question that silences the room. Welcome to Stallone Unleashed. Let us uncover what really happened. The scent of chalk dust and old paper hung in the air of the high school classroom. A familiar, almost comforting aroma to Elias Thorne. He stood at the front of the room, a quiet, unassuming figure in a worn tweed jacket. His presence a stark contrast to the restless energy of the 30 or so teenagers who sat before him. Their faces a mixture of boredom, curiosity, and the carefully cultivated indifference of adolescence. He had been invited by the school's history department to give a guest lecture on the human cost of conflict, a topic he approached not with the dry detachment of an academic, but with the quiet, empathetic reverence of a man who understood that history was not just a collection of dates and battles, but a tapestry woven from individual lives, individual sorrows, individual acts of quiet courage. He spoke of the forgotten soldiers, the unsung medics, the resilient civilians whose stories were often lost in the grand, sweeping narratives of war. He didn't use slides or flashy graphics. He simply spoke, his voice low, calm, yet carrying a weight, a conviction that seemed to gradually penetrate the students' initial apathy. He saw them begin to lean forward, their gazes less vacant, their postures more attentive. In his pocket, his fingers idly traced the smooth, worn surface of a small, hand-carved wooden bird, a knot-winger, a gift from his late wife, a woman who had taught him the profound importance of listening to the quiet, often unspoken stories of the human heart. As he concluded his talk, he opened the floor to questions. A few hands went up, the questions predictable, focused on the more dramatic aspects of warfare, on weapons and tactics. Elias answered them patiently, always steering the conversation back to the human element, to the personal cost, to the quiet, often invisible, wounds that lingered long after the fighting had stopped. Then, a hand went up in the back of the room, a small, hesitant hand belonging to a young girl with wide, serious eyes and a cascade of dark hair. She had been quiet throughout the lecture, her expression thoughtful, almost somber. "Yes," Elias said, offering her an encouraging smile. The girl, whose name he would later learn was Maya, stood up, her voice barely a whisper, yet carrying a surprising intensity in the suddenly quiet classroom. You talked about the invisible wounds," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "The things that soldiers bring back with them, the things that people can't see." Elias nodded, his gaze gentle, attentive. "Yes, Maya, I did." "Well," the girl continued, her voice dropping even lower, her gaze falling to her desk. My dad, he cries in his sleep sometimes." The confession, so simple, so raw, so profoundly personal, hung in the air, a stark, heartbreaking counterpoint to the usual, impersonal discourse of a history class. A few of the other students shifted uncomfortably, their expressions a mixture of surprise and a dawning, awkward sympathy. The teacher, a well-meaning but slightly flustered man named Mr. Henderson, started to interject, perhaps to spare the girl any further embarrassment. But Elias raised a hand, a small, calming gesture. He looked at Maya, his eyes filled with a deep, empathetic understanding. He saw not just a teenage girl sharing a painful family secret, but a daughter grappling with a sorrow she didn't fully comprehend, a daughter seeking, perhaps, not answers, but simply a moment of acknowledgement, of validation. The wooden bird in his pocket felt like a small, insistent weight, a reminder of his wife's belief in the power of a single, clear, true note to cut through the noise of the world, to reach the hidden depths of the human heart. He waited for the classroom to settle, for the uncomfortable shuffling to cease. Then he asked a question, his voice soft, gentle, yet imbued with a profound, almost preternatural insight. "Maya," he asked quietly, his gaze holding hers with a steady, unwavering compassion, "is your father a veteran?" The question, so direct, so perceptive, seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Maya's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock, surprise, and a dawning, fragile relief. It was as if this quiet, unassuming stranger had, with a single, simple question, seen directly into the hidden, unspoken heart of her family's pain. Maya stared at Elias, her mouth slightly agape, the question hanging in the air between them, both of validation and a gentle inquiry. The other students, who had been on the verge of succumbing to adolescent restlessness, were now utterly still, their attention captivated by this unexpected, intensely personal turn in the conversation. Even Mr. Henderson, the teacher, seemed to be holding his breath. Maya nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. He was. A long time ago, in a place he never talks about." Elias nodded slowly, his expression one of profound, sorrowful understanding. He didn't need to know the name of the place, the dates of the conflict. He knew the landscape of its aftermath, the geography of its invisible wounds. He had seen it in his own brother's eyes, had felt its echoes in his own life. "Thank you for sharing that with us, Maya," Elias said, his voice gentle, respectful. "That took a great deal of courage." He then turned his gaze to the rest of the class, his expression serious, thoughtful. "What Maya has just shared with us," he began, his voice calm, but carrying a new weight of authority, "is perhaps the most important history lesson we will discuss today. It is a reminder that the costs of conflict are not just measured in lives lost on the battlefield or in territories gained or lost. They are measured in the quiet, often hidden, suffering that continues long after the soldiers have come home. They are measured in the nightmares that haunt the sleep of fathers, in the unspoken sorrows that settle over families, in the invisible wounds that can sometimes be the hardest of all to heal." He saw a new understanding dawning in the eyes of the students. The usual classroom dynamics of boredom and distraction had been replaced by a somber, reflective attentiveness. They were no longer just learning about history. They were feeling its human consequences. "Your father's tears, Maya," Elias continued, his gaze returning to the young girl, who was now listening with a rapt, almost reverent intensity, "are not a sign of weakness. They are a testament to what he has endured, what he has witnessed, what he continues to carry. They are, in their own way, a kind of medal, a badge of courage that is far more profound, far more difficult than the kind we often celebrate in movies or in history books." He paused, then added, his voice imbued with a quiet, unwavering conviction, "The courage to live with memory, Maya, the courage to face the ghosts of the past, day after day, night after night. That is a heroism of the highest order. And your father, by that measure, is a very great hero indeed." A single tear escaped from Maya's eye and traced a slow path down her cheek. But it was not a tear of sadness, not entirely. It was a tear of understanding, of a profound, cathartic relief. For the first time, perhaps, someone had given her a framework for understanding her father's pain, a language for his silent suffering. Someone had seen his tears not as a source of shame or confusion, but as a symbol of a deep, enduring, and heroic strength. The wooden bird whistle in Elias's pocket felt like a quiet amen. Its purpose, his wife had always said, was to offer a clear, true note in a world often filled with dissonance. And in this quiet classroom, amidst the unspoken sorrows of a young girl's heart, Elias had, he hoped, managed to do just that. He had offered a note of understanding, of validation, of a profound, unwavering respect for the quiet, often unseen battles of the human spirit. The bell, signaling the end of the period, rang with a jarring, intrusive shrillness, breaking the spell that had fallen over the classroom. The students began to stir, the usual end-of-class rustle of books and backpacks filling the air. But the atmosphere was different. The usual boisterous, almost frantic, rush for the door was replaced by a more subdued, more thoughtful exit. Several students, as they passed by Maya's desk, offered her a quiet, sympathetic smile, a gentle pat on the shoulder, small, almost imperceptible gestures of a newfound empathy, a dawning understanding. Maya, for her part, remained seated, her gaze still fixed on Elias, as if reluctant to let the moment, the connection, end. Mr. Henderson, the teacher, approached Elias, his expression one of deep, almost humbled gratitude. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice low, I don't know what to say. That was extraordinary. You reached them in a way I rarely can. Thank you." "It was Maya who reached them, Mr. Henderson," Elias replied quietly, "by having the courage to share her truth. I simply offered context for it." He then walked over to Maya's desk, his movements slow, deliberate. He knelt down slightly so that he was at her level, his gaze gentle, respectful. "Maya," he said softly, "I know that what you shared today was not easy, and I want you to know how much I admire your courage and your love for your father." Maya looked up at him, her eyes still glistening, but with a new light in them, a light of understanding, of a burden shared, and perhaps slightly lessened. He never talks about it," she whispered. "He just gets quiet and sad, and I never know what to do, what to say." "Sometimes, Maya," Elias said, "there is nothing to say. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer someone who is suffering is simply our quiet, loving, and underscoring judging presence. To let them know that they are not alone in their pain. To sit with them in their silence. That in itself is a profound act of healing." He paused, then reached into his pocket and took out the small, carved wooden bird whistle. He held it in his palm, its smooth, worn surface a testament to a lifetime of quiet contemplation. "This," he said, "was a gift from my wife. She believed that everyone has their own unique song, their own true note. But sometimes, because of the hurts and the hardships of life, we can forget how to sing it. We can lose our voice." He gently placed the whistle in Maya's hand. "Perhaps," he said, "this can be a reminder for you, Maya. A reminder to always listen for your father's true song, even when it is quiet, even when it is tinged with sadness. And a reminder to never be afraid to sing your own." Maya closed her small hand around the whistle, its warmth seeming to seep into her skin. She looked at it, then up at Elias, a profound, unspoken gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." "You are most welcome, Maya," Elias replied. He stood up, gave her one last, encouraging smile, and then turned to leave. He knew that the path ahead for Maya and her father would not be easy. The wounds of war were deep, their healing a long, arduous process. But he also knew that today, in this quiet classroom, a small but significant seed had been planted, a seed of understanding, of empathy, of a daughter's renewed appreciation for the quiet, heroic battles of her father's heart. And sometimes a single seed of hope was all that was needed for a new, more compassionate story to begin. As Elias walked down the now empty school corridor, the echoes of the day's events resonated in his mind. He thought of Maya, of her quiet courage in speaking her family's hidden truth, of the profound love for her father that had motivated her question. He thought of the other students, their initial indifference giving way to a somber, thoughtful empathy. And he thought of Maya's father, a man he had never met, yet whose silent struggle he felt he understood with a deep, almost visceral clarity. The invisible wounds of war, Elias knew, were often the most insidious. They festered in the quiet, lonely hours of the night. They cast long shadows over the brightest of days. They created chasms of misunderstanding and silence between those who had endured them and those who had not. To bridge that chasm, to offer a language for that silent suffering, was, Elias believed, a sacred and vital task. His own work as a historian, as a storyteller, was in many ways an attempt to do just that, to give voice to the forgotten, to honor the unseen, to illuminate the quiet, often heartbreaking, courage of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity. He hoped that his words, and the small, symbolic gift of the bird whistle, would offer Maya and her father some measure of comfort, some small tool for navigating the difficult terrain of their shared sorrow. He hoped that Maya would come to see her father's tears not as a sign of weakness, but as a testament to his enduring humanity, to his capacity to feel, to remember, to love, even after all he had been through. And he hoped that her father, in turn, might one day find a way to share a small piece of his burden with his daughter, to allow her into the locked room of his memories, not to traumatize her, but to allow her to understand, to bear witness, to offer the profound, healing power of her love. As he stepped out of the school and into the crisp autumn air, Elias felt a sense of quiet purpose, of a day well spent. He had come to Northwood High to teach history, but he had, he hoped, also participated in a small act of healing. He had been reminded, once again, that the most important stories are not always found in books or archives, but in the living, breathing, often aching hearts of the people we encounter every day. The bronze star in his pocket felt like a quiet affirmation, a link in a long, unbroken chain of memory, of sacrifice, of the enduring human need to find meaning and connection in the face of loss. He knew that Maya's story and her father's would stay with him, becoming a part of his own inner tapestry, a poignant reminder of the quiet, heroic battles that are fought, and sometimes, with a little grace, a little understanding, a little love, even won in the silent, unseen arenas of the human soul. The world was full of such stories, he knew. His task was simply to keep listening for them, to keep honoring them, to keep reminding others that every voice, every sorrow, every quiet act of courage mattered. The following week, as Elias was preparing to conclude his series of lectures at Northwood High, he received a small, hand-delivered note from Mr. Henderson, the history teacher. It was an invitation to a small, informal gathering after school, a thank you from the department for his time and his invaluable contributions. Elias, a man who generally shied away from such social obligations, found himself, for some reason, inclined to accept. When he arrived in the school library, a space he found far more congenial than the gymnasium, he was greeted not just by Mr. Henderson and a few other faculty members, but also by a small group of students from his lectures. And among them, standing a little shyly near a bookshelf, was Maya. She offered him a small, hesitant smile, a smile that held a new, quiet confidence. The gathering was pleasant and formal. The teachers thanked him for his insightful talks, for the way he had engaged the students, for bringing history to life in such a personal, meaningful way. The students, for their part, seemed genuinely appreciative, asking him further questions, sharing their own thoughts and reflections. But Elias found his attention repeatedly drawn to Maya. She didn't say much, but he noticed the way she held herself, a little straighter, a little taller than before. He saw the way she interacted with a few of her classmates, a quiet warmth, a gentle confidence in her demeanor. The bird whistle, he noticed, was tied with a simple leather thong and worn around her neck, a small, unassuming pendant that rested just over her heart. As the gathering began to wind down, Maya approached him, a small, sealed envelope in her hand. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice soft but clear, this is for you. It's from my dad." Elias was taken aback. He accepted the envelope, his fingers tracing the unfamiliar, yet surprisingly steady, handwriting on the front. "Maya," he began, that's very kind, but—" "Please," she insisted, her eyes pleading. He wanted you to have it. He said you would understand." Elias nodded slowly, a profound sense of humility, of privilege, washing over him. He didn't open the letter there, in the midst of the chattering students and teachers. He knew, instinctively, that its contents were private, sacred, a message intended for him alone. He simply tucked it carefully into the inner pocket of his jacket, next to the bronze star. "Thank you, Maya," he said, his voice a little thick with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Please give your father my very best." "I will," she promised. She then did something that surprised him completely. She stood on her tiptoes and gave him a quick, gentle hug. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice filled with a sincere, heartfelt gratitude that was more eloquent than any words. "For everything." And then she was gone, rejoining her friends, her laughter, this time, sounding clear, genuine, unforced. Elias stood for a moment, a quiet observer in the bustling library, the weight of the unopened letter in his pocket a tangible presence, a testament to a connection forged, a story shared, a small but significant act of healing set in motion. The quiet narratives of courage, he reflected, were indeed all around, waiting to be heard, waiting to be honored, waiting to change the world, one heart at a time. Later that evening, in the quiet solitude of his small, book-lined room, Elias sat in his favorite worn armchair and, with a sense of profound, almost reverent anticipation, opened the letter from Maya's father. The handwriting was neat, precise, the script of a man accustomed to discipline, to order. The words, however, spoke of a world that had been anything but orderly, anything but precise. "Dear Mr. Thorne," the letter began, "my daughter Maya told me about you. She told me about your talk, about your kindness, about the way you spoke of things that I have not been able to speak of myself for many, many years. She told me you gave her a small wooden whistle, and that you told her to listen for the true notes in herself and in others. I do not know you, sir, but I feel I owe you a debt of gratitude that I can never truly repay." Elias paused, his heart aching with a mixture of sorrow and a deep, empathetic respect. He could almost feel the effort, the courage it must have taken for this man to write these words, to bridge the chasm of his own long-held silence. "For years," the letter continued, "I have been a ghost in my own home, a shadow in my own daughter's life. The war, it took something from me that I have never been able to get back. It left me with memories, with images that have haunted my days and my nights, that have built a wall between me and those I love most. I have seen the confusion, the hurt in my daughter's eyes, and it has broken my heart 1,000 times over. But I did not know how to reach her. I did not have the words. I did not have the strength." Elias had to stop reading for a moment, his own eyes blurring with tears. He thought of his own brother, of the similar, unspoken struggles he must have endured. He thought of the countless veterans, the quiet heroes, whose pain so often went unseen, unheard, unacknowledged. "But your words to my daughter, Mr. Thorne," the letter went on, "they seem to have given her a new language, a new understanding. She came to me last night, after your talk, and for the first time, she didn't look at me with confusion or with fear. She looked at me with a kind of gentle, knowing compassion. She didn't ask me about the nightmares. She didn't ask me why I was so sad. She just sat with me, in silence, and she held my hand. And then she told me, 'Dad, it's okay. I hear your song, and it's beautiful.'" The simple, profound power of those words struck Elias to the core. He could almost hear Maya's voice, could almost see the scene, the quiet, healing connection between a father and a daughter, a connection that had been made possible by a small act of kindness, by a few carefully chosen words, by the passing on of a simple, yet profound, piece of wisdom. "I do not know what the future holds for me, for my family," the letter concluded. "The road ahead is still long, I know. But for the first time in many years, Mr. Thorne, I feel a flicker of something I thought was long extinguished. I feel a flicker of hope. You have given my daughter a gift of understanding. And in doing so, you have given me a gift as well. The possibility of finding my own voice again, of perhaps, one day, being able to sing my own song alongside hers. For that, sir, I am, and will remain, eternally grateful. Yours in respect, Daniel." Elias folded the letter carefully, his hands trembling slightly. He placed it on the small table beside his chair, next to the bronze star that had belonged to his own brother. 2 stories, 2 lives, 2 quiet testaments to the human cost of conflict and to the enduring, resilient power of the human spirit. The wooden bird whistle had found its true purpose. It had offered its clear, true note, and it had been heard. The letter from Maya's father, Daniel, became a quiet touchstone for Elias in the days and weeks that followed. He kept it with his most treasured possessions, the bronze star, his wife's poetry, his mentor's stilled watch, a collection of objects that, to an outsider, might seem disparate, but to him, formed a coherent narrative of the values he held most dear: courage, love, integrity, and the profound, often overlooked, significance of quiet human connection. He never saw Maya or her father again. Their paths had crossed, briefly, intensely, and had then diverged, as paths so often do. But he carried their story with him, a poignant reminder of the ripple effect of small, empathetic actions. He often wondered about them, about their journey. He imagined Daniel, slowly, hesitantly, beginning to share some of his stories with Maya. Not the graphic details of war, perhaps, but the quieter memories, the stories of comradeship, of loss, of the complex tapestry of human experience in the face of extremity. And he imagined Maya, listening with her newfound understanding, her quiet compassion a healing balm to her father's long-held wounds. He knew that their healing would be a long, slow process, a journey of 1,000 small steps. But he also knew that they had taken the most important step of all. They had found a way to connect, to communicate, to share the burden of a sorrow that had for too long been borne in silence. The story of Maya and her father found its way into Elias's own storytelling, not in any explicit, identifiable way, but in the deeper, more nuanced understanding of the intergenerational impact of trauma, of the quiet, heroic battles fought not on foreign fields, but in the living rooms and kitchens of ordinary families, long after the wars were officially over. It informed his lectures, it deepened his writing, it enriched his own quiet contemplation of the human condition. One crisp winter afternoon, several months later, Elias was walking through a local park, the bare branches of the trees stark against a pale, winter sky. He saw a father and a young daughter bundled up against the cold, flying a brightly colored kite. The kite soared and dipped on the wind, a vibrant splash of color against the grayness of the day, its string of fragile, yet tenacious, link between the earth and the sky. The father was showing the daughter how to handle the string, his movements patient, his voice a low, encouraging murmur. The daughter, her face alight with a mixture of concentration and pure, unadulterated joy, listened intently, her small hands learning the delicate dance of tension and release. The scene, so simple, so ordinary, resonated deeply with Elias. It was a perfect metaphor, he thought, for the delicate, often challenging, but ultimately beautiful dance of love and understanding between a parent and child. It was a dance of holding on and letting go, of guiding and trusting, of sharing the burden and celebrating the flight. He thought of Daniel and Maya, and he felt a quiet, profound sense of hope. He knew that they, too, were learning that dance, finding their own rhythm, their own way of navigating the often unpredictable winds of memory and emotion. The bronze star in his pocket felt like a quiet promise, a testament to the enduring power of love to heal, to connect, to transcend even the deepest of wounds. And Elias Thorne, the quiet historian, the keeper of forgotten stories, continued on his way, his heart a little lighter, his faith in the resilient, redemptive power of the human spirit quietly, profoundly reaffirmed. The seasons turned, as they always do, the harshness of winter slowly giving way to the tentative, fragile promise of spring. Elias continued his quiet life, his days filled with the familiar rhythms of research, writing, and solitary contemplation. The memory of Maya and her father remained with him, a quiet, resonant chord in the symphony of his own accumulated experiences. It had become a part of his inner landscape, a story that informed his understanding of the world, a testament to the enduring power of empathy and the unexpected grace of human connection. One afternoon, while browsing in his favorite dusty, secondhand bookstore, he came across a small, locally published anthology of poetry and prose. He picked it up, its unassuming cover appealing to his preference for the overlooked, the understated. As he idly flipped through its pages, a particular name caught his eye: Maya. The poem beneath the name was short, simple, yet imbued with a wisdom and a maturity that seemed far beyond the years of its young author. It was titled The Whistler's Song. The poem spoke of a father's silent sorrow, of tears shed in the darkness, of a daughter's confused, aching love. It spoke of a quiet stranger, an old man with kind eyes, who had offered not answers, but a different way of listening. And it spoke of a small, carved wooden bird, a whistle whose clear, true note had taught her to hear the beautiful, heartbreaking song that lay hidden beneath her father's silence. It was a poem of pain, of healing, of a profound, transformative understanding. Elias read it once. Then again, his heart filled with an emotion so profound, so overwhelming, that he had to sit down on a nearby stool to catch his breath. He felt a sense of connection, of a circle completed, that was almost mystical in its intensity. He had given Maya a whistle, a symbol, a story, and she, in turn, had transformed it into art, into a poem that would now be shared with others, its message of empathy and resilience rippling outwards in ways he could never have anticipated. He bought the book, of course. He took it home and placed it on his desk, next to the Bronze Star, next to his wife's own volume of poetry. It was another talisman, another testament to the quiet, often unseen, but profoundly powerful narratives of human courage and connection that were, he knew, the true, enduring history of the world. He never sought out Maya again. He didn't need to. Her poem was message enough. It was a confirmation that the seed he had planted had not only taken root, but had blossomed into something beautiful, something that would, in its own small way, offer light and hope to others. And Elias Thorne, the quiet historian, the keeper of forgotten stories, knew that this was the ultimate purpose of his work, of his life, to listen for those clear, true notes, and to help others, in whatever small way he could, to find the courage to sing their own. The world, he knew, would be a far richer, far more compassionate place for their songs. The discovery of Maya's poem marked a quiet, profound culmination for Elias. It was a validation of his deepest beliefs, a testament to the idea that small, empathetic acts could indeed create ripples of positive change that extended far beyond the initial encounter. He often reread the poem, its simple, elegant lines a source of quiet joy and a constant reminder of the interconnectedness of human stories. He imagined other readers discovering it, perhaps finding in its words a reflection of their own unspoken sorrows, a flicker of hope in their own struggles. Maya, in her own way, had become a storyteller, a whistler, passing on the clear, true note of compassion that she herself had received. Elias's life continued in its usual quiet, contemplative rhythm. He continued his research, his writing, his solitary walks. But there was a new, subtle layer to his observations, a heightened awareness of the potential for transformation that lay dormant in even the most ordinary of human interactions. He saw potential Mayas and Daniels everywhere, in the tired faces on the city bus, in the anxious energy of teenagers in the park, in the quiet dignity of the elderly patrons in the library. He was more conscious than ever of the invisible burdens people carried, of the silent battles they fought, of the profound human need for acknowledgement, for understanding, for a simple, unjudging presence. The Bronze Star in his pocket, the wooden bird whistle now in Maya's keeping, the stilled pocket watch, the river stone. These were not just mementos of his past, but tools of his present, constant reminders of the values that guided him. They were symbols of courage, of resilience, of the importance of listening, of the enduring power of a quiet, principled stand. He never sought out public recognition for his small interventions. His work was not for an audience, but for the individuals whose lives he touched, however briefly. His reward was not in applause, but in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had, perhaps, made a small corner of the world a little kinder, a little more compassionate, a little more attuned to the quiet, often heartbreaking, but ultimately beautiful, music of the human heart. The story of Maya and her father was a story without a definitive end, for healing is a lifelong journey. But it was a story with a profound, hopeful new beginning, a beginning sparked by a chance encounter in a high school classroom, by a quiet question, by the willingness of one human being to truly see and to hear another. And for Elias Thorne, That was a story worth more than all the grand, sweeping histories of kings and empires. It was the story of us. Elias Thorne, in the quiet autumn of his own life, continued to be a student of these small, profound human dramas. He knew that the world would always be a place of both casual cruelty and unexpected grace, of thoughtless indifference and profound empathy. His role, as he saw it, was not to change the world in some grand, sweeping gesture, but attend to the small, often overlooked, gardens of human connection, to nurture the fragile seedlings of understanding and compassion wherever he found them. The story of Maya and her father became a cornerstone of his own inner narrative, a powerful testament to the idea that even the deepest wounds, the longest silences, could be bridged by a single, courageous act of reaching out, of speaking truth, of listening with an open heart. He often thought of them, a father and a daughter, slowly, carefully, learning to sing a new song together, a duet composed of both sorrow and hope, of a painful past and a possible, brighter future. And in that thought, he found a deep, abiding sense of peace. The world, for all its noise and its fury, was also a place of quiet miracles, of unexpected redemptions, of the enduring, resilient power of love. And Elias Thorne, the quiet historian, the keeper of forgotten stories, the gentle champion of the human spirit, was content to be a humble, grateful witness to it all. His own story, like all stories, would one day come to an end. But the echoes of his quiet courage, of his unwavering empathy would, he hoped, continue to resonate, passed on in the stories he told, in the lives he touched, in the simple, profound truth that every human heart holds a song worthy of being heard. The bronze star, the stilled watch, the river stone, the carved bird, the poignant poem, they were all just notes in that larger, more beautiful, and eternal human symphony. And Elias was content to have played his small, quiet part.